Before we begin, I must take a sip of coffee. Go ahead, have one. Feed the addiction. You know you want to. Now you are beginning to see the dark side of gurus. It gets you addicted to things like coffee, and once you're on it, there's no return. They make you their slave. Now what can you do? I am Ray, and today we are going to expose the dark side of spiritual gurus. Now the first thing that I realize where people get silly is that they do the same thing with spiritual gurus as they do with any guru, but also it's the same thing that men often do with women. And it's called fantasy projection. Let's use the man and woman example for a moment. Here's a man. He's got eye problems. Here's a woman. She's got a long body. He's in love. And she's just a normal girl, doing her best. But because he has this whole fantasy in his imagination, he projects this fantasy onto her. So instead of seeing the real person, he sees this imaginary version of her. Oh, she's like this perfect woman. He doesn't fall in love with the person, he falls in love with an idea. And she is not an idea, and she does not want to be treated like an idea. And so the man gets caught up in his own fantasies and drives himself insane until eventually he pushes her away because nobody can deal with that kind of nonsense. Some even say that's what killed Marilyn Monroe. She had hundreds of thousands of men projecting onto her this fantasy image, and nobody can hold that because that image is not real. And so the same thing happens with spiritual gurus, is that a person, maybe they're traumatized for whatever reason. They are vulnerable, pretty vulnerable to me. And they project all of these ideas of what they think the guru is, and they fall in love with a fantasy. But the guru, fancy guru, the guru is just a person, just a human being like you. But what do? We elevate them to this godlike status. Now there's a reason for this, and it's not just all fantasy projection, but for one who's particularly vulnerable, it can cause a problem. Because what happens, they have an idea of how this guru should act, or even how any person should act. And when that guru doesn't act in accordance to that idea, they will feel like they're betrayed. So they have this glorious image of this person, and then illusions have been shattered. And it is very hard to have your illusions shattered. Let's, for instance, talk about betrayal, because it doesn't exist. Betrayal is not actually what we believe it is. And so what happens? A normal person has an imaginary idea of another, whether it's a relationship, a friend, a guru, doesn't matter. They have an idea about them, but that's all it is. It's just an imaginary idea. We can't ever really know anybody in this life because we don't know what it's like to be in their shoes. We may have similar experiences. We may know the person enough to get a feel for their patterns of behavior. So we just conclude, oh, okay, I know him. But we really only know people enough. We don't know them in their totality. We don't know the thought that they think. We don't know their inner battles. We don't even know ourselves. And so the problem is, when we live with an imaginary idea about someone else, we're living in ignorance. And ignorance is also darkness. And so long as you're living in ignorance and darkness, there is a day of reckoning headed your way, my friend. Why? Because one day the light of truth shall be revealed. And light and darkness cannot be present at the same time. The light reigns. And so what happens is that when the light of truth is finally revealed, our illusions are destroyed, our ignorance. And because we were attached to that illusion, to that darkness, it feels like we got burned. Like the other person betrayed us. But no, the person was always who they were. You just didn't know who they were. And so you were betrayed by your own thoughts. by your own imagination of who you thought that person was. I say hell is the truth when you have been living a lie. Now, don't beat yourself up so much. We're all living in ignorance. It is this wonderful human experience. Ignorance is a part of this. And so the way we avoid falling in this trap, for instance, you may have a certain idea about me, about who I am. No offense, but you only have an idea about who I am. It's not the truth, because we can't really know anybody. We can only say, well, I know that person enough to say, I know that person. And that is okay. We accept our human limitation, that in this human body we can never know the whole truth. But don't be surprised when I begin acting in a way that's not in accordance to who you think I am. What if I do this? What if I do this? You didn't expect this, did you? I haven't betrayed you, have I? So practically speaking, we can say, okay, well, I know that person enough so I don't have to really think, who is this person? But at the end of the day, we accept the fact that, okay, I am limited. I don't know the person fully, and that is okay. And when you are more malleable in this way, you're not so stuck, this person is this way, and I know they're that way, and this is who they always been, and this is who they will always be. This is who they will be. And you hear people say that all the time. This person is this way. They've always been this way. And they're always going to be this way. Why? Because I know them. I've seen them. Their actions, their past actions have revealed to me, in my vast knowledge, I have seen the truth that this person is no good, and they will always be no good. No, we're all living in ignorance. Just accept it. Be like Socrates. You know nothing. You know nothing. And that's okay. It's okay to know nothing. And just know that if you think you know everything, well, you're going to be betrayed by your own thoughts, because the truth reigns supreme. All ignorance eventually is destroyed. So think about it in your own life. It doesn't have to be with a guru, but with anybody. Do you get caught in this kind of fantasy projection about somebody else? And the way you know you have overcome a fantasy projection is that you can see and accept the flaws in that individual. Because when you're stuck in a fantasy projection, you think the other person is perfect. You elevate them to God status. Doesn't have to be a guru. It could be a relationship or a friend. They're the best thing in the world. Wow. And okay, we love our fantasies. But just know that unless you kind of just tone it down a bit, it's easy to get hurt. Hurt yourself with your own thoughts. Because you think a person is one way and they're not. And then when they act as they really are, you are betrayed by your own thoughts. Now another thing is, when you become awakened, it doesn't mean you suddenly become a saint overnight. All of the garbage that you had in your previous life, you take with you into the awakened state. Now, of course, as you dive deeper into this, you naturally become more virtuous. You naturally do the right actions. It's just what happens. But we have to understand is that in the awakened state, you are no longer bound by good and evil, because you understand clearly that the darkness and the light are equally important. So you don't reject the evil in you, but you accept both the good and the ugly. Which means that gurus still have all of the normal human things. They still have instincts. They have survival instincts. They have sexual instincts. They have an instinct for power. Yes, there is heart consciousness there too. And there is higher spiritual knowledge consciousness. Third eye consciousness. But you see, we like to categorize spiritual gurus in this way. Okay, well, they have to be all heart and third eye consciousness. Wisdom and unconditionally loving to the world. But it is often because we reject the lower nature of ourselves that we reject the lower nature in others. And so what happens? Well, you find that, well, a spiritual guru is having sex with their followers. Now there's a moral dilemma here. Because, well, at least from my perspective, if somebody is coming to you for teaching, to help with their life, to grow and learn on the spiritual path, this right here will get in the way. There has to be a kind of separation between between the student and the lover. Not that the lover couldn't be a student. It's just people should get their priorities straight. I'm not even going to get into this anymore because it's a touchy subject. The point is, we still all have these instincts. They're not going away. So long as we live in a human body, they're there. There. So don't be surprised when your favorite spiritual guru acts in a way like this. And it's not all this. Because the one who is awakened, they accept these parts of themselves. They don't see it as wrong to strive for power. They don't see it as wrong to have sex with people. And if they're pushed to the limits of survival, they may act in ways where you never thought they would act that way. We like to think we're so civilized. We're all 3 days away from eating each other. Don't worry, we are still apes at heart. It's just most people have never had to experience that side of themselves. Now, one of the pitfalls that I'm sure I fell on in, you could say, teaching a bit too soon. Now, I don't believe in mistakes, so I don't see it as a problem, but it's something to be aware of. And that is, people who teach without experience. This battery is dead. I heard the spiritual teacher Vishrant. He said, a lost person can only lead others to be more lost. So what happens is that people have spiritual experiences, spiritual awakening experiences, and then suddenly they go out and teach all these things because they've learned spiritual knowledge and spiritual wisdom, but they may not have been fully established in that wisdom. So they teach people spiritual ideas, but it doesn't really help because knowledge without practical application is useless. And so if you are looking to be a spiritual teacher, or if you want to know which spiritual teachers to follow, because on YouTube there are many, not just the big ones, but the small ones as well. I don't know of any midget spiritual teachers, but we'll find one. The green flag is when they say, this is what I experienced. This is what I did. A red flag is when they only tell you what to do. Now, if they're an expert in their field, they're going to tell you what to do because they know what to do. But make sure they also tell you their story about their experiences and what they went through, because that helps you recognize their authority, why you should listen to them in the first place. I'm sorry, I was in the way. That's why I had this line here, so I wouldn't make this mistake again. Another red flag. Now I'm too off camera. What is going on? Let us zoom out just a bit. How's that? Is that better? Congratulations. I lost my train of thought. Just be here now. This is the only way. Probably not true. This is one way. Don't listen to people who try to put you in a box and say this is the only way you can do things, and if you don't do it this way, well then you're not good. There are many ways, my friend. Highways, freeways, highway. That was the Mexican in me coming out. The red flag people are going to be closed off, whereas the green flag people are going to be open. Another one, I can't imagine people would really experience this. I mean, maybe. You must only follow me. I am the source of wisdom. You must come to me for it. Or the red flag guru. Get you to rely on them. And it's like this power play between, well, a submissive follower and the master. So they get you to rely on them for wisdom, for love, for whatever. And then once you're in, you're in. You're stuck. But the green flag guru shows you the way to the inner guru. The guru in you. Because the guru in the guru is the same guru in you. It's all one. God is your guru. Which is why at the end of the day, it's good to listen to spiritual teachers. It's good to read spiritual texts. But the most powerful thing you can do, if you want the truth, is to pray and meditate. To open up a dialogue with God. Because, well, guess what? The person who wrote that spiritual text, whether the Bible or the Bhagavad Gita or the Quran, whatever, they were getting the message from the same source that you are connected to. So you have access to all that knowledge. So too, the spiritual teacher speaks from the same place. The only thing is, we are often separated from that place within ourselves. We become separated from Source, from God. And so sometimes we rely on others to show us the way. Another way. You see, the most important thing we can do is get ourselves right. Be in harmony ourselves. In body, mind, and spirit. Because when we are aligned, in alignment with truth, it's very easy to tell apart right from wrong, truth from ignorance. Because when you're connected to truth, you know what truth looks like. But when you're so stuck in ignorance, well, you can't really decide. Is this truth? Is this ignorance? What is the deal here? So any manipulative person on this planet, they will use your ignorance against you. But if you remove that ignorance, you learn how to critically think, you connect to the truth within you, you will not fall under the manipulation of anybody. Because you are established in your own wisdom, and you know the truth when you see it. And you see what happens, whether with a guru or a relationship or whatever. If you have trauma, there's going to be something in you that makes you vulnerable. And more likely than not, you will not be able to help yourself. And so it's easy to fall prey to manipulative forces. And if you want to avoid that, we must heal ourselves. We must enter onto a journey of healing. Healing the trauma in our body, the psychological imbalances. And sure, a guru can guide us on this journey. You simply have to be aware of selfish intentions. And it's not that hard when you actually start looking for it, because we cannot hide our intentions. We cannot hide our thoughts. Our thoughts are worn on our faces. So, if I was secretly trying to take advantage of you, there would be a part of you that doesn't trust me. And maybe you don't. That is okay. The process is not yet complete. You will be mine soon. Don't worry. And this often happens in relationships where somebody speaks to you in the way you like to be spoken to. They say all the right words, and you buy into it, and they reel you in. And then before you know it, you're trapped, and they're taking advantage of you. And you realize, well, they weren't who you thought they were. And it's not that you have to be always on the lookout for people manipulating you. All you have to do is be tapped into the truth within yourself, to listen to your instincts and your intuition, because they will guide you. They will tell you there is something wrong with this person, and you may not know why, but the more you can learn to listen and follow your intuition, the more clear the message becomes. And it comes down to self-awareness. Well, are you vulnerable? Are you aware that you're vulnerable? And if you are, well, it's probably good to put up some boundaries. And what happens, especially with gurus, is that we become attached to them. And the natural wall between our brains and the information received, the door opens up. And we just accept all of the things they say as truth. But remember, they're only human. They make mistakes. They say things that are wrong sometimes. Once you trust a person, you naturally just believe everything they say. Because if we were to try and pick apart everything everybody says, we would go crazy. It's too much. So we have a mechanism in us that, well, once there is trust established, we just naturally take their word for things. All I'm saying is to be cautious. Remember that the person is a human being, and they make mistakes in this form. From a higher spiritual perspective, there are no mistakes, but from the practical day-to-day worldly things, you can say there are mistakes. And especially if you are not awakened. Currently you are trapped in ego, and the ego always makes mistakes. Once you become free from the ego, you realize, okay, there are no mistakes. So the point is, think for yourself. Tap into your own inner wisdom. And don't just rely on an outside source, because you don't need to. Because no matter what, all the sources of information outside of you, they will be corrupted in one form or another. When the person who writes a spiritual scripture, the message gets corrupted from God to them, their interpretation of the message. And then the message gets corrupted again, because language has limitations. And so the message gets confined to a specific language. And then the message gets corrupted again in the interpretation of that message. And then the message gets corrupted again. when the person who interprets that message begins speaking about it. So no matter what, outside of you is lots of imperfection, of lots of corruption. But within you, you can tap in directly to the source. You have direct access to truth, my friend. The guru's job is to guide you toward your own truth so that you can be self-reliant. The guru is nothing but a mirror. They help reflect back to you where you are still attached, where you're still stuck in ego, and where you can become free. And so instead of getting attached to the guru, use them for this purpose, as a mirror, to help guide you back to the truth. Sorry, I get hiccups. I am Ray. Visit my cool store. Much peace and many blessings, and remember, just be.